Welcome to Betrayal Recovery Radio, the official podcast of APSATS, the Association of Partners of Sex Addict Trauma Specialists, hosted by Dr. Jake Porter. APSATS is a nonprofit organization providing professional training and compassionate support to partners affected by problematic sexual behavior and betrayal trauma. In each episode, Dr. Jake guides a conversation of enlightening insights and practical tools to empower those affected by sex addiction and betrayal trauma to use their voices and live their values. The mission of Betrayal Recovery Radio is to offer hope to those in need of healing and growth to those moving through grief. And now, here's your host, Dr. Jake Porter.
Welcome to this week's episode of Betrayal Recovery Radio. I am your host, Dr. Jake Porter, and I'm glad that you're joining us for another great day here on the APSATS podcast. Hey, right now, as this very episode is being released publicly, I believe APSATS is doing its signature training, its multidimensional partner trauma model training. This is a training for professionals, for coaches and counselors, therapists who are wanting to work with those who have experienced betrayal partner, those who are partners of sex addicts, learning to give them support through a lens of understanding betrayal as traumatic. If you are listening and you are not familiar with APSATS or this training, please go to apsats.org, apsats.org. Learn more about it. Obviously, it's too late to sign up for this training going on right now, but there will be more offerings in the future, as well as many other trainings as well. So check that out. But it got me thinking, because it's been a few years since I took the APSATS training initially. Um, and in fact, then that got me thinking, this is 5 years now. I'm coming up on the 5-year mark since I began doing this work, this clinical work with couples who are suffering from the effects of betrayal and sex addiction full time. 5 years ago, I started my practice, Daring Ventures, and transitioned out of full-time ministry and into doing this work. And so I thought that today what I would do is just spend a little bit of time with you rather than having a guest on, sharing with you some reflections on what I've learned 5 years into doing this work full time. Now, to be fair, I actually started doing the work uh, part time 9 years ago. And that was only after several years of being in recovery myself. And so I've got more than 5 years in this game, but 5 years since starting Daring Ventures and making my whole vocation in life doing this work with couples and individuals who suffer with sex addiction and betrayal trauma. So that's what I'm going to do today. I'm going to share with you 8 things that I've learned along the way. And my hope is that as I share these things, a couple of things. First of all, if you are listening as someone who works in this field, you're a coach, you're a therapist, maybe you're just getting started, maybe you've been in that work for a while, but you're just starting out helping in this particular population. I hope that you can learn from some of my mistakes and save ourselves and our clients a lot of maybe pain and turmoil and suffering, just by learning from what I've done wrong, and then maybe figured out how to do a little more right. Secondly, though, if you are one who is the partner of a sex addict, or you are the partner of a sex addict, meaning you yourself suffer from addiction, then I hope that this empowers you. And I hope that it empowers you in several ways. First of all, I do believe that knowledge can be power. I think that if you understand more about the process of recovery and healing from trauma, that you will be able to make choices that set you up for better, faster, deeper healing and recovery than if you didn't have that knowledge. So I hope that you gain the knowledge, and then also my hope is that that translates into you being able to advocate for yourself as you're seeking help and support from those around you, whether that be professionals, counselors, coaches, family, friends, pastors, small group leaders. Sometimes, we have people come in and, my mom just doesn't get it, they say, or, my Bible study group just doesn't get it, or uh, my best friends, I'm trying to share with them my experience, and they say, just get over it. They say this, that, the other. Well, hopefully some of what I share today might equip you to better explain some of your own experience, some of your own needs, and 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 then advocate for yourself in those important relationships that you need for support. Then my last hope is that it might bring some clarity to you. Again, whether you're the one who has the addiction or did the betraying, or you're the one who discovered the betrayal, um, sometimes we feel like we're stuck. Sometimes things aren't going as we hoped, as we planned, and we're not sure why. And so, my hope is that maybe walking through some of these things that I've learned might help some of you go, oh, that's it. That's what I've been trying to figure out. That's what I've been missing. That's what I've needed to understand. So those are sort of my hopes from today. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and just jump into this thing. I've got a list here of 8 things I've learned, and going to riff on those as we go through. So the first point I would say is this: that betrayal is an issue of justice. Okay. Now, 5 years ago, I would have never said that. Not because I disagreed with it necessarily, but because I wouldn't have known to say it. Okay. I wouldn't have known to say it. Uh, I wouldn't have thought in those terms. But absolutely today, I understand that hidden betrayal is an issue of justice in a relationship. So let me unpack that a little bit. And I want to give credit where credit's due. A lot of this that I'm about to share comes from a theory or a model of counseling and therapy called relational cultural theory or relational cultural therapy, which is a social justice based model. And here's the basic tenets there: that people should be empowered to show up in relationships freely, um, making choices with as many facts as possible, empowered to show up or not according to all the knowledge that's there, knowing everything. That's not all that theory teaches, but that's a major part of it. And that I want my wife to be able to show up having all the facts because that's better for her and me. So let's think that through a little bit. If I withhold parts of reality from my partner, if I allow my partner to believe the nature of our relationship is something other than it really is, in essence, what I am doing is I am disempowering my partner. I am taking away from her choices to show up according to all, her true response to all the facts. So if I withhold information, if I minimize, if I distort, twist, if I color her view of what's going on so that she doesn't have all the facts, essentially what I am doing is I'm trying to manage her perception so that I can manipulate her choices. If my wife knew I was doing X, Y, and Z, then she would leave, or she would, tell me that's not okay, or she would, whatever it is. Therefore, I'm going to withhold data. I'm going to not tell her I went here over lunch. I'm going to hide this over there. I'm going to leave out this part of the story. I'm going to outright lie when she asks me this question or that question. If that is my frame of mind, what I am doing is I'm trying to control how she shows up. And by withholding data that she doesn't have the power to know herself, I am disempowering her within the relationship. That's why I say that hidden betrayal is an issue of justice. It's not just, there is disempowerment happening. I am taking away choices that my partner has the right to make. Now, this has huge implications then for how I, as a professional, am going to approach a couple where they're suffering from the discovery of hidden betrayal, right? For me to move quickly to a place of trying to get them to be same as or equal, or where the betrayed partner is um, in essence being asked to just trust again, that's unreasonable. It's unfair. I would even say it can be abusive and traumatic. Okay, because this partner now has a history. They now know they have a history of being disempowered, of not being able to be given a choice. And so there's going to be a period of time where there's going to be a recalibration happening, right? Where the balance of power is going to feel like it tips, because there has to be such a shift in the power dynamic. Here's what this looks like. I'm not saying like, therefore, the partner who did the betraying, should be mistreated or punished or anything like that. That is not the case. But there may be a period of time where the one who did the betrayal, the one who was committing the deceit, who was uh, disempowering the other partner, that one has to play by some rules that the betrayed partner isn't yet comfortable or confident to play by. Here's what I mean. They're going to have to demonstrate their willingness to be completely open and honest and transparent. Okay. Um, Perhaps while their partner doesn't feel safe being that vulnerable, right? They're going to have to demonstrate their willingness to put the relationship first, to prioritize protecting the relationship over protecting themselves, which, as I'll share later, actually is what's best for them. But they're going to have to do that to demonstrate that they really mean that they want that they can do that, while the betrayed partner is still in a protective stance, watching to see, can I shift to putting the relationship first? I lived putting the relationship first for years, and look where that got me. So before that partner is going to step into that again, into that willingness to be vulnerable in that way, they're going to be watching the partner who did the betraying to look for their ability to be all in, essentially, to put the relationship first. That's going to feel like an imbalance. It's going to feel like the one who did the betraying, the one who is in recovery for addiction, is being asked to play by rules that the betrayed partner isn't. That's the result of years, maybe decades, of that power differential and the imbalance being the other way. Now, can it stay that way? No, it can't stay that way forever. But but it might need to be that way for a time while trust is being rebuilt. Here's why this is so important as a professional, because I want to help them understand that. I want to help them both get that. I actually have this silly video. I'll put the link to it in the show notes with this episode. A silly little YouTube video called "Are You on the Coaster?" So even if you're listening and you don't have the links in the show notes, you could just Google Jake Porter "Are You on the Coaster?" and it'll pop up on YouTube. And it's just a silly little illustration showing this power differential. And it has been essential. It has been so essential, particularly in helping addicts, recovering addicts, or the ones who did the betraying, to better understand why it feels uneven, and to understand how they can lean into that in a way that helps them get what they really want sooner, which is healing and restoration for their relationship. So understanding that can really set someone up to show up in a much more powerful and effective and healing way. All right, that was number one. Hidden betrayal is an issue of justice. Number two is this: disclosures can be healing rather than traumatic. I remember when I was going through my training for this stuff way back 2013, I think it was when I first started getting trained and learning how to do disclosures and just thinking to myself, oh, that sounds horrible, and people acknowledging this is traumatic. This is, the dump truck of awful stuff that the addicted partner is just offloading onto the betrayed partner, and now the betrayed partner is going to have to carry it, and it's traumatic, and you just want to do your best to minimize that trauma as best you can. And I thought, oh, good grief, that sounds horrible. I don't want any part of that. And now disclosures are what we do more than anything else in my practice. But that's in part because I've learned that disclosures can be, I can't promise it. I'm not, I can't predict the future. I can't control the process for the clients. But I think it is possible in many cases that the disclosure experience, while still being very difficult, very hard, it doesn't have to literally be traumatic. Traumatic means too much too fast, right? In a disclosure context, so much so fast, and what makes those situations actually become traumatic in a long-term way is when the person's brain and nervous system, their mind, isn't able to metabolize that too much too fast pretty quickly, um, and then it becomes something that has triggers associated with it, and that those sort of classic trauma symptoms. But the reality is that if someone has enough support and they can help receive that help to stay grounded, their whole brain online, grounded, as they go through that process. Grounded doesn't mean you're not having feelings, even big feelings. You're going to have feelings. I don't want you to dissociate. That's not good either. But if someone can be grounded and feel that intense support and able to move through it at an appropriate pace, not cram it into one 90-minute or 2-hour session, but take a day for this process. It really can be, though it's hard, grueling, it can be healing. I have many, 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 many times, dozens and dozens and dozens of times, had partners say on the back end of a disclosure, that was hard, but I feel so much better. I feel so much more connected because maybe the betraying partner, the addicted partner, has been coached to show up with empathy through the process and show up and be fully relationally present, which is an incredibly healing thing. And so, you know, uh, your disclosure can be more than just a dumping and offloading of all the horrendous data. Okay. Advocate for yourself. Those of you out here who did the betraying, advocate for your betrayed partners to have the time, the space, and the support they need in that disclosure experience so that it doesn't become just one more trauma in a long line of traumas, but actually can be a turning point to where, oh, we're able to look at and talk about this stuff in an entirely different way. So that's number 2. Disclosures can be healing rather than traumatic. Number 3 is this: co-occurring disorders must be assessed, diagnosed, and treated alongside sex addiction. So, there are people out there who, they've tried to get into good recovery for years, 2 years, 4 years, 7 years, 10 years, and a lot of these folks have come to our practice and they're saying, I don't know what's going on. I do the groups, I do the books, I do the 12-step stuff, and I'm not getting better. I'm not getting better. And here's what I would say: most of the time, what we find out, what we discover, is that these are individuals who are dealing with more than just sex addiction. I'm not saying just there in a minimizing way. I'm saying that there's something else on board. It's not sex addiction in isolation. There's another co-occurring disorder. Maybe it's depression. Maybe it's PTSD. Maybe it's a personality disorder. There's so many things that could be going on. Maybe they're on the spectrum, but there are lots of things that are going on that we need to understand so that we can actually help the person get the results they want. I get to teach at Houston Graduate School of Theology, which is part of Kairos University in their graduate program in counseling. And what I always say to my students, I just drive it home in almost every class. I say this at some point. If you're not getting the results you want in treatment, right? If you're not hitting the goals, the treatment goals, you have to look at the treatment plan. Am I executing the treatment plan? And if you look at that and you say, well, yeah, I am executing the treatment plan and I'm not hitting the goals, now you have to go, wait a minute, what's this treatment plan based on? Well, it's based on a diagnosis. So I have to look then, okay, well, is my diagnosis reflected in the treatment plan? Are they appropriately linked? And if the answer is yes, the diagnosis I came up with sex addiction and I'm doing a sex addiction treatment plan, but I'm not getting the results. Now I have to go further back in that chain, and further back in that chain is assessment. Did I assess for other issues? Is there more going on? And if I go back to that assessment and I go, is there something more? And I discover, oh, wow, you know what? Maybe there's some obsessive compulsive personality disorder here. Or, you know what? Maybe this person um, uh, does have some PTSD that's that is you know a separate issue from, not entirely separate because everything's interrelated, but from the sex addiction. And now we integrate the treatment of that co-occurring disorder. Now we begin to see results. We've seen really amazing things happen when we discover that there's a co-occurring disorder. And what we're able to do is we're able to change the treatment so that both things are being treated, and then we often begin to see the results that we want. And so, if you're listening and maybe you're the person with the addiction or you're the partner of that person and you're thinking, man, we've been at this a long time, we're not getting the results, we're not seeing the change. Here's another way this often shows up is that a betrayed partner goes to a support group, and this partner is hearing the stories of everyone else in the group and how their partners in recovery are doing and they're getting better and all of this. And that person's thinking, why aren't we making that progress? Why are we going so much slower? Why aren't we seeing those changes? And they begin to compare and despair, right? Maybe something else is going on. And so it's worth going back. I understand it's an investment to kind of go backwards, but it's also not good to keep throwing good money after bad, keep doing the same thing, same thing, same thing, hoping for something different. So go back, take the time to do the assessment. Any well-trained clinician can do that. And if a master's level clinician does that and doesn't quite get an answer, you may need to even step it up again and go to a clinical psychologist for a full psychological evaluation. But it can be a game changer. I'll tell you one quick story. I worked with, and I'm changing details here. I worked with a couple um, who we weren't making progress, weren't making progress, weren't making progress. And honestly, I'll tell you that I thought this guy's a sex addict with strong narcissistic tendencies, which is common. That's not super uncommon. And we weren't making progress, weren't making progress, weren't making progress. And I had suggested, and another therapist on the treatment team had suggested a full psychological evaluation. And this gentleman was resistant to that. And then his wife asked for that for her birthday present. And so he consented. And it came out, and this is a guy who had been through many, many, many decades of life. What that revealed was that he is on the autism spectrum. Well, I don't, I'm not too proud to admit it. I had just totally missed it. But once I knew that piece of the puzzle, I was able to change the treatment plan. And when I changed the treatment plan, they began slowly but steadily making progress, making progress, making progress, with just some simple little tweaks and changes to the way I was helping them. So this is a really important thing. You deserve to have help from people who are not going to try to cram you into a one size fits all formulaic approach. Look, there are box sets out there of recovery resources, and they're great for people who are only dealing with sex addiction. But when those box sets aren't working, you need to go to someone who can take the time and know the questions to ask to figure out, hey, what else is going on here? So that's number 3. Co-occurring disorders must be assessed, diagnosed, and treated alongside sex addiction. So the fourth thing that I've learned, and this is no shocker to any of you who listen to this podcast for a while or have been following me for a while, empathy is essential for healing, and I mean that both individually and relationally. So let's unpack that a little bit. Sobriety alone is not going to cut it. Recovery is not meant to be an end in itself. Recovery is not a goal, it's a means. It can be initially a goal, but only to then reach a greater means, which is a full life, a great life, right? A life of rich relationships and meaningful connection and fulfilling experiences that last, right? That's what it's supposed to set us up for. Things that we couldn't have when we were active in our addiction, things that our addiction stole from us, robbed from us, thwarted, got in the way of, right? And so I've got to look beyond merely stop acting out, stop doing, this behavior, that behavior, stop having those thoughts. It's got to go way beyond that. And I think the next step beyond that for most folks in recovery is expanding empathy, because it is intimately connected to having a full, more accurate, more full, more accurate, compassionate, self-reflective ability as well. Okay, let me tie that together. If I can't understand my own internal emotional relational experience, if I can't reflect on what's happening within me in a way that is self-compassionate, which means I'm very reactive, criticizing, judgmental toward myself, which means I'm going to go into reactivity, which means I'm not going to then be able to be present with you, right? If I don't have that, I'm not going to be able to have good empathy either. So I've said this when working with couples, and I've had some betrayed partners kind of like raise their eyebrow. He's supposed to have self-compassion. Like, what about compassion for me? They're related. They're absolutely related. Okay. They're absolutely related. Let me give you a scenario. A betrayed partner who all this partner wants is to be able to share the pain of the betrayal with the one who did it, to feel known and seen and validated in that. But every time this partner brings up the pain, their partner, the one who did the betraying, goes into shame, shuts down, right? And now that leaves the betrayed partner all alone. So see, it's not good for anybody there. But if I can reflect on what I'm feeling, oh, I'm feeling shame come up, and I can have some self-compassion and some awareness of what that is and why it's there and the story that's connected to it, then I can actually stay present enough to hear and better understand and actually respond to what's happening in you, right? In the other person, the one who's sharing their pain. They are absolutely connected. And it works this way as well. As I am better able to hear your emotional experience and feel with you, that's what, to have empathy means. I feel this with you, not for you, but with you. As I'm better able to do that, that expands my ability for that my own self-reflection and empathic um sort of orientation to my internal experience. So they're absolutely related. One feeds the other, feeds the other, feeds the other. um and so it is through this experience of learning empathy that I also am learning knowledge of myself. And as I have knowledge of myself, I can better share myself, which brings about more intimacy. So, empathy is built in group therapy. Intimacy is built in support groups, in 12 step groups, as I'm listening to other people's shares. Empathy is built in individual therapy and in couple therapy. Empathy is built in my marriage. Empathy is built in my friendships. Every relationship that is healthy, every relationship that is leading toward mutual growth and flourishing for folks, those relationships have empathy as a marker for them. And so, you've got to look. If I'm speaking now to the one who has the struggle with the addiction, the one who did the betraying, I'm saying you got to look beyond stopping the behavior, and you've got to look to empathy, which is connected to that own self-compassion and accurate self reflection. Okay, and and that is going to set you up for better healing, both for you and for your partner in your relationship. So we want to cast that vision on the front end, okay, on the front end of things. Um, I wish I had that clear and understanding of how important empathy is when I started this work, because what would have changed would have been that I would have talked about it a lot more up front, and I would have been advocating for it a lot more upfront in the process. All right. Okay, so that was number 4. Empathy is essential for individual and relational healing. Number 5, what I've learned so far is that no one can set a boundary for anyone else. No one can set a boundary for anything else. So when I first started working with couples, so a little bit about my sort of the evolution of my career in this particular field. I started out absolutely certain I was only going to work with men, individually, male addicts. That's it. I'm not going to do any other work. Wasn't interested in couples work. Wasn't interested in working with partners. And then Kathy Reynolds, who I still work closely with today, she's on my team here at Bearing Ventures. She's been on this podcast before. Uh, Begged me, and this was several years ago now. I don't know, 7, 8 years ago now, to please start seeing some partners. I did. I actually found it to be really rewarding, but I thought, okay, but I do not want to get 2 clients in the room at the same time. Couples work, no, I'm not doing that. And then I was getting begged, please do this, please. So okay, so I started seeing couples, and there was a dynamic, and I'm really telling on myself here. And if you're a marriage therapist, you're gonna understand. You're gonna be like, "Ooh, yeah, that was bad." But at the time, I was working primarily as a pastoral counselor. I hadn't had a lot of the trainings that I have now, and better see the error of my ways. So I would sit there in this room with this couple, and the betrayed partner would look at me. Usually, that was the wife. She would look at me and like, help me. She'd be saying something and her partner wouldn't understand it, or asking for something, and the partner was, and the husband was like resistant or kind of complaining or whatever. And she would look at me, help me. And so I would come in, I had her back, and I'd lay it down. I'd lay down the law. All right. Essentially, that partner saying, he's not respecting my boundaries. You set the boundary. You've got to, do this. And I did that. And it was horrible. It was not good because well, for a lot of reasons, but number one is there's a big difference between me supporting a partner to be empowered to set her own boundary and me setting the boundary for her. That is not empowering. And what that does is that actually harms my ability to work with the couple in this way. So even now today, so I do these intensives with couples, right? And before they come, we do a really thorough assessment process to try to understand them as a couple. And then they have a meeting with me where we talk about, okay, what would an intensive look like for you? If the partner does not say, for example, I want a disclosure with polygraph, if that partner is unwilling to say that in front of their spouse, I can't say you have to do a disclosure with polygraph, because what I just did was, now I've already poisoned the well in the process, because this usually it's the man who's the addict. In most of the cases I see, that's not always the case, but he will then feel like I'm pushing that, and it's not something she needs. That is not helping them stabilize and get back to a place of mutual empowerment. If she needs that, she's got to ask for it. She's got to ask for it. Now, when she does, 100% I've got her back. Okay. Because we've got a policy here. We support every reasonable request of a betrayed partner, because it's an issue of justice. Right. And so she says she needs it. Absolutely. I'm putting it on the proposal for the intensive. If she's not willing to say it, I'm not going to be the one, because it is poisoning the process already. Now he's going to think, this guy's just pushing polygraphs, and this guy, blah, 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 blah. No, he needs to know that she needs this, and she has the right to voice that need. It is not effective for me or anyone else to step in and set a boundary for someone else. I want to equip that person and support that person to set their own boundaries. I'm going to have their back once they do, but they've got to do it. They've got to do it. Otherwise, I'm colluding with the dysfunction that already exists in the system. So my teammate comes back and says to me, she's scared to death. She's just afraid to say it in front of him. Well, then, like, I am sympathetic to that, but now we just need to work to help her get in a position to say it. How, is there another way to do it? Does she need to communicate it in writing and copy me in on it? Does she want to have a joint session with both their individual support people, their therapists or their coaches or counselors there? What do we need to do to help them get to that place where she can say, I need this. I need this. So that's a huge change, a huge growth area for me. Seeing that I don't want to collude with the dysfunction and prolong the dysfunction of someone not having a voice by me stepping in and using my voice. I want to use my voice to encourage, empower, inspire that person to amplify their voice, not step in so that their voice can still be basically a non-existent factor in the relational dynamic. That's not good for anyone. All right, number 6 of what I've learned 5 years into this work full time. Grief is where the healing happens. Grief is where the healing happens. So many good resources are now coming out that deal with this, and a lot more people are talking about it. But I can tell you, 5 years ago, it wasn't being talked about. And I gave presentations, I'm thinking 4 or 5 years ago, at both the ITAP symposium, where all the CSATs gather, at SASH, that's the Society for the Advancement of Sexual Health. At both of those, gave presentations about the necessity of couples grief work for there to be healing of the coupleship. And it was, at the time, not a lot of people were talking about this. Now, a lot more people are. There are a lot of folks in our AppSats community who do a lot of this work. I'll shout out to Coach Galen. She's got some good work on this, and others as well. But here's what's so important, is that so many people focus on sobriety, which is important. It is essential. So many people focus on disclosure and getting to disclosure. It's the then what, right? Okay, now what? And the then what is grief. Okay, it's grief. It's mourning the loss. In the multidimensional partner trauma model of AppSats, there are 3 phases of healing, and this is originally based off of work by someone named Judith Herman, who was really a forerunner in understanding psychological trauma and the therapy that's needed around it. Phase 1 is safety and stability. There's got to be that safety and stability. And disclosure is a big part of that. If I don't know what's happened, my brain is going to continue the search for what happened because it's an issue of safety. If I can't piece together my past, I can't anticipate threat in the future. My brain says that's not safe, that's not okay. Therefore, but what happened? But where? But what? Do I have all the data? On and on, right? So disclosure is necessary for that. After I have all the data, now though, I've got to go into what does this mean? Now I know what the data is. What does it mean, right? That this happened. What does it mean that this is my story now? And that's where the healing happens. Grief is hard. Grief is painful, but grief is where in my own mind, I reorganize sort of my default reality, my assumptive world, my understanding of what this world is and who I am and how I fit in it and who you are and how we fit together in this world. And once I have made that meaning, once I've crafted that in my own mind, made sense of what's happened, not I don't like to say made sense. Once I have the story, have a coherent story of what's happened, now I can move into the future with a little more confidence and certainty. And that can happen individually for sure. If you're listening and you've experienced betrayal and the one who did that betraying is not on board with recovery, maybe your marriage, your relationship is already over, maybe it's hanging on by a thread. Listen, here's what I want to say. You can heal. You can heal. It may not be the healing that you so desired, a healing that includes the healing of your marriage or your relationship, which is one more thing to grieve. But you can heal. You can get help and support to walk through the rubble and piece together a story. And not just a story, but one from which you actually find meaning and purpose. And if you're early in the process, you hearing me say that, you might want to punch me in the face. But I will hold the hope for you until you're ready to hold it for yourself. But if you are in a relationship and you're post disclosure and you just feel stuck, maybe you're the betraying partner and you feel the same way, are you grieving together? Are you going and standing over the grave? Are you talking about the past? You have to do it. You have to do it because you have to have confidence. You have to have confidence that you have the same story, because that shared understanding of the past is what sets you up for a shared trajectory for the future. Okay. And it begins to heal the relational rupture between you, that attachment rupture. And in that, trust can be rebuilt on a deeper level, right? I've had partners say things to me like, I trust that he's not acting out, but I still don't trust him with my heart or with my pain. Well, there needs to be the experience of shared grief that gives confidence to that betrayed partner that in fact that pain is going to be received and in a way that it's not doesn't end up with them getting left alone, lost in the other person's shame, get defensiveness or stonewalling back, right? So grief is such a crucial part of the healing process. I've discovered that and learned more about all that means along the way. I wish I'd known it up front. I'd look back on some couples that I think uh, might have made it if I had known that 5 years ago. All right, number 7 of things I've learned so far is that lack of capacity is different from a lack of will. And I talk a lot about, if you follow any of my other stuff that's out there, the difference between defenses and deficits, that we have to understand the difference between defenses and deficits. This is something I learned from Dr. Stan Tatkin and his PACT model, psychobiological approach to couple therapy. A defense mechanism uh, could be that the person has the capacity to do the thing, to show up with empathy, to hold the pain of their partner, to tell the truth, whatever it is. They've got the capacity to do it, but they're resistant. They don't want to. It feels too painful, whatever, right? That's a defense mechanism, and that is something that we're going to, if I see that happening when I'm working with a couple, I'm going to call it out, right? I'm going to say, well, why are you going into defensiveness right now? Uh, it seems like it is so painful for you to hear about her pain, that the way you protect yourself is by withdrawing from it. you know how's that really getting you what you want and you need? So I'm going to just confront that in a really direct way. That's different than an issue of a deficit, which is to say a lack of capacity, where let's say someone experienced a lot of neglect growing up. Maybe they had all the food they needed and they always had clothes and they always had a roof over their head, but no one was mirroring them. No one was showing them empathy. No one was helping them regulate their own emotion. No one was helping them, cultivate that understanding of their own internal emotional affective experience. Well, having that experience in our infancy and toddler years and childhood is what builds the capacity within us. And there are people out there, I see them every week in my office. They didn't have that experience, so they have a lack of capacity. That is very different than them not wanting to or just being resistant. That's very different than them choosing to isolate if they just go into collapse or overwhelm. And so that needs to be treated differently. Now, rather than that confrontation, even if it's gentle confrontation, rather than that, what I'm going to go to is I'm going to try to help them build their capacity. I'm going to try to help them expand that. And that doesn't happen overnight. It takes some time. But I'm going to try to install within them some new paradigms and some new ways of thinking and patterns of believing, and that lead them to these experiences that expand that capacity to tolerate the pain or the anger or the shame or whatever it is, and stay present and stay online, stay relational, right? They're two very different things. Sadly, I know that I did this early on in my career, and sadly, I know it still happens in other therapists and coaches' offices. You've got someone coming out of an addiction who has a deficit. They have a lack of capacity, but the helping professional is treating it like it's a defense or just a lack of will, lack of desire. And so they're hammering them about it. They're shaming them about it. They're coming down on them hard. And all that is doing is reinforcing the deficit, reinforcing maybe some of the relational trauma that's the reason for the deficit. It's not helpful. Do I want a hammer in my toolbox? Absolutely. But I've got to have more than a hammer, because I've got to be able to work with more than just nails, right? I need more tools in my toolkit. And here's so that's my hope for professionals out there listening. If you're a partner hearing this, though, I've had it partners, once they understand this, they feel such relief, because maybe they've had someone, a coach or a therapist who didn't understand this, telling them, well, he's just not wanting it and he's just not choosing and he's not in recovery, and you just need to have stronger boundaries and you just need to, you know, all this. But the partners intuitively, they're like, no, I think he really loves me. I think he's trying. It's just not in him. Well, I hope you feel validated. And I hope you know that there are professionals. I want you to hear there are professionals out there who understand the difference between a defense and a deficit, between a lack of capacity and a lack of will. And they can help the two of you um, uh, e- work around the deficits, but also try to expand the capacities. Um, and I can't promise the total overcoming of every deficit in any person's life. That's not what I'm saying. But I have seen tremendous growth and healing happen when treated appropriately, with the right tools. So that's number 7. All right, last one here. Last one here. Hugely important. One that, oh my goodness, I'm so glad I've learned it now. Wish I had known it when I was getting started. Number 8, values provide a positive direction for change. So, you know, often, early on, it's about don't do this, don't do that, don't do that, don't do that behavior, stop doing that, don't look at that, don't touch that, don't go there, don't say that, don't, right, don't. And early on, sometimes that might be all that someone trying to get into recovery can handle. But eventually, it's not enough to not do one thing, to not do something. Okay. So for example, I get a couple in here and the guy's learned don't argue and get defensive. And so when his wife says something and he feels within him this desire to argue and be defensive, he won't give in to that. So he just does this. Yeah, if you're listening, you can't see me. If you're only on the audio, not the video, I've got my arms crossed, I've got my lips pressed, my brows furrowed, my eyes are closed, right? So, so okay, good on you for not being defensive, but that's that's not getting you where you want to be. It's not enough to know where I don't want to go. I need to know where I do want to go. This is where values come to play. So I asked that guy, what kind of husband do you want to be? And I'll even maybe sometimes give him a list of core values to look at and choose from. And he might say, I want to be a husband who's compassionate, faithful, honest, and loving. Great. That sounds great. Now, what would it look like in your body to be those things right now? How could you embody compassion, faithfulness, honesty, and love right now? How can you apply that not just to the words you say or don't say, but the look on your face, your tone of voice, the posture of your body, whether you're leaning in or leaning out? How can you apply? And they go, oh, and they do that. Game changer. Game changer. This is also true for betrayed partners. You've got to set a boundary, right? You want to learn to speak up for yourself because you realize you've been, railroaded for all these years. And these are words I've heard from betrayed partners before. You're not going to be a doormat anymore. Great. But then what happens, I've heard from partners, is they in their efforts to use their voice, they end up sounding like someone they know they're not, doing things that aren't true to their character, feeling shame later about doing it, or having to just convince themselves they shouldn't feel shame because he had it coming, or now's their turn to use their voice. And here's what I coach them is, hey, use your voice in a way that also corresponds to your values, right? So if you do that, you are still absolutely able to set a boundary, to speak your truth, whatever it is, but you're going to walk away feeling so much cleaner, so much better, so much less noise in the system, right? And you get to become more of what you like and value about yourself. The same is true for the addicted partner, the one who did the betraying, who's in recovery. When you act on your values, when you embody them and you let them actually drive behavior, you are becoming more of that person you want to be. So it's not only giving your partner what they need, it's not only helping your relationship move toward repair and connection, it is helping you continue to develop in that person you want to be. So early on in this process, maybe you're out there and you're toward the beginning of this recovery process, this journey of healing from betrayal. Early on, just Google list of core values, okay? Look through there, find 4. Don't get a list of 18. That's too much to try to hold in your head. Get 3 or 4 core values that you can remember, that you can recall, that you can hold up as a sort of measuring stick for yourself as you're making choices, and start acting on those. Not just so you're not just saying no to negative directions, you're saying yes to positive directions. It will empower you to grow in ways that you wouldn't believe. And it's good for everyone around you too. It's really good for everyone around you because then you're showing up more authentically in your relationships. Oh my goodness, how I wish I had known that early on and leverage the power of people's personal values in this process. So, hey, that's it. 8 things that I have learned 5 years into doing this work full time. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Betrayal Recovery Radio. We'll have another episode for you next week, same time. Hey, if you haven't done it, be sure to subscribe to our podcast on whatever your favorite listening platform is. Hit subscribe. That way you get those notifications and you never miss an episode. And I'll tell you something else you could do to help us out. Would you share this episode or another episode with those who might benefit from it? Shoot a text to others in your support group, in your therapy group, in your 12-step group. If something in this was helpful, let them know. Let's get the word out about these kinds of free resources that help people to recover and heal in healthy, optimal, flourishing ways. All right, folks, thanks again, and y'all take care. You've been listening to Betrayal Recovery Radio, the official podcast of AppSats. If you've received help or hope from this episode, I encourage you to share it with someone you know. If you've not yet done so, please subscribe to our podcast on your favorite listening platform. Thank you for joining us. I'm Dr. Jake Porter, and you can always email me directly at jake@appsats.org. I'd love to hear your ideas, questions, or comments about the show. Until next time, keep choosing to use your voice and live your values. It's good for you and for this world.